sang this song to me. There was a message in its melody, sweetest lyrics that I ever heard. There's a message in the songs of birds. Tomorrow is another day. Living is the only way tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be alright.
Greetings and welcome to A Sip of Inspirations podcast. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, known as the Empowerment Doctor, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here with you. I need to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you are watching this show live, you are watching it both on my Facebook page as well as my personal Facebook page. The personal Facebook page is Empower DR and the business is Empowerment Doctor. Both will get you here. So that's pretty exciting for us. I want to invite you to run over to my website, champagneconnection.com, where all of the previous podcasts can be seen and heard, along with some free merchandise and tools to help you change your life. So let me know what you think about those. So with that, I have this wonderful sponsor that I have to take a time to tell you about. I want to thank Resource Industrial Supply Equipment. When you need a supply company to rise to your needs, call Resource Industrial Supply Equipment. And those of you know that they've been sponsoring our segments for quite some time. So we are really excited to have them. Joining me for tonight's conversation is Alexis Nicole White. Her purpose in life is helping business owners grow. She's got an incredible background. I'm going to say just a little bit about her and then turn it over to let her tell you the rest. She is the owner of ANW Consulting, and she published a novel called The Covered, which I thought was incredibly exciting. And after she published that novel, she realized the importance of project management. So she understood that entrepreneurs needed consultants to help guide their understanding of best practices while implementing solutions to streamline their processes. And that's what she does through ANW Consulting. So welcome, Alexis. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
So tell us how you got started in ANW Consulting. And I'm curious about how writing a book took you there.
Absolutely. So ANW Consulting is my project child, where I started understanding as I worked with other small business owners, entrepreneurs, people who have projects, like my book, for example, which was a project, right? And so once we get started doing things, we have the end vision in mind, but there's so many steps and intricacies and complexities along the way that require precision. And most times we don't know how to coordinate all these things together. So as a professional who had a background in project management, I started to realize that this was something that the average entrepreneur does not know. Typically, when a person starts a business, they have a skill. It may be, I can knit blankets for fun. Now I can monetize that, but you don't know how to scale it. You don't know how to run a business. You don't know how to set it up. You don't know how to introduce new products or services, or to do little tweaks to modifications to improve and drive revenue. So that's where I came into place, because people will always call me and say, hey, what do you think about this? And then I would just tell them instinctively what to do to make things better. And I was like, you know what? I could really be getting paid for this, because this is my professional job. This is what I do for a living. And I don't go give them anything for free. So, I like you, but this is a little bit, in depth here. So, I just started to monetize my skill set and started to make sure that I equip people with that hands-on guidance, because a lot of times once they have a person, they don't know who to call, when to call, what to ask, how to do any of that, right? And so I just give them the opportunity to tell me what's going on. I do a discovery session. I diagnose and make recommendations or give some pointers on best practices on how they can improve. And from that, we start to be able to move forward. And what's exciting is that people see the value add. They may not have been a believer before, But once they start to understand that, it's a form of tough love, because you're going to say, now, why did you do that? That makes no sense, or, give me some insight as to why you thought that was the next best step, right? Because you want to get into the minds of why people are thinking the way that they're thinking, so that you could correct that behavior from happening. And a lot of people just don't realize just how important it is, because someone can tell you, Dr. Coleman, you want a new website, I'll do it for $7,000. And you're like, okay, but then when you realize that a website didn't really cost $7,000, but because you don't know any better, you don't know what to expect, you don't know how to hold them accountable with timelines, you don't know how to budget, your resources and the requirements, or it's a slippery slope. I may have told you that it's $7,000, but I didn't tell you that for me to get work on the weekends, that's going to be an added $2,000. All of the logistics of trying to get something up and running. People just don't know how to manage it unless you have the precision and the discipline of working with a project manager.
What are some of the biggest problems you run into that business owners have, especially small businesses? Because I know that there's a big difference between how a corporation would do it. Not that some of them all do it well,
right?
But there's a big difference between the corporation and the small business.
So the biggest challenge with small business owners is not that they don't have the right ideas in mind or the best of intentions. A lot of times they don't want to listen. Like this is your baby. I get it. This is very important to you. I understand, right?
Right.
But you also have me here for a reason. Let me guide you on what this looks like, because you're absolutely right. Enterprise businesses, they have a strategic plan. They're not going to undertake anything that does not align with their strategic goals that is going to increase revenue. They're just not going to do that. And entrepreneurs and small businesses who are starting to get the momentum of making money in their business, they're like, well, I got it. I did it all this by myself, and that's fine and dandy. But when you start talking about scaling and needing to continuously improve, the formula is not going to be the special formula, a one-time thing. You can rinse and repeat for the first couple of years, but as your brand starts to grow, as your business starts to develop and you start to get more customers, you need to improve that continuously so that you get those reoccurring customers to come back. When I tell you 90% of your customer base is going to be from your residual customers. So it's not the new people that you're targeting. It's your current customers that you need to keep happy. They don't want to hear that, so it's like, okay, you hear me, but you're not understanding, that this is something that you need to give attention to. Always work on your processes, always continuously improve and make things better for your customers. So I would say that that's like the biggest challenge. Trust the subject matter expertise that you have on board to help you. You might not like what you have to hear, but this is something that you need to hear and listen to it so that you can improve to grow your business in the long run.
So the idea that what they were able to do by themselves, and I'm sitting here laughing because I know that mindset very, very well, is that they do one thing and then that's it. And they did it all by themselves. They don't need any help now. But how do you convince them that what they're doing, the 90% of the people who are there with them now are the ones that they need to look at? Because most small businesses, I even had fallen in this trap before. They think that it's the new people that they're trying to reach when it's really not. Mm-hmm. So how do you coax them along so that they can get that? Because if they don't get that, they're sort of hindering their opportunity to grow.
Right. And it's a grow mindset, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to understand, what are your goals? How can I help you realize those goals, right? Mm-hmm. And how are we going to stretch ourselves to reach those goals? And so one of the first things that I ask when I say, tell me a little bit about your business. What are your pain points? What are some challenges that you have? Once they start talking about that, I want to understand, what are your goals? What is your vision for your business? If your goal is to have just your one brick and mortar, then that's fine, but mm-hmm. that doesn't mean that you can't, you can get relaxed. Every organization has user experience, customer experience, customer enhancement. That's there for a reason, because you want to keep them satisfied. If your business has 10 people right? And 90% of your business is coming from those 10 people. If they're satisfied, they're going to go tell another 7 people, you need to call Dr. Coleman. She'll get you right on up, whatever, right? Think about it. Your customer base just went from 10 to 70. So how are you going to retain and cater to those 70 people if you're comfortable with the little 10 people that you have, right? And think about it. If those 70 people go and then they tell somebody else, then guess what? That's another group of people that you have to go. So you have to keep that growth mindset in place. Unless this is a hobby for you, and this is just something you want to do for your cousin Pookie and them, you gotta think outside the box. And that's where the strategy comes in, right? So that's where my question is, tell me more about what your goals are. Tell me more about what it is that you would like to achieve. What is the vision about this? How do you think that you can get there? And what is it that you would like to get from me to help me get you there? Right? Because at some point, if it's an impasse where we're not in sync with what it is that we're trying to achieve, then this is not going to be beneficial for you no more than it is going to be for me. And nobody wants to waste their time. So let's have this conversation now and figure out what it is that we want to do, and then make a plan on how we're going to get there.
Do you find that they're intimidated by those questions, or even maybe a little fearful about thinking too much out of the box?
Yes, it can be, because some people, well, I shouldn't even say some, let me scratch that. A lot of people say, I never thought about it that way. And I will be honest, I'm very logical, very analytical, and very strategic. My top skills are integrity, strategic thinking, and determination. So if you're telling me you have a problem, I am going to find a solution for that problem, and I'm going to give you a step-by-step on how to get there. And then they'll say, oh, well, I never thought about it like that. And that's why I'm here, to add value. But if you're not buying in and listening, if I tell you to go left and you went right, and then you wonder why we're 10 exits down, I told you to turn around a long time ago. So, I mean, are you surprised that you're down in Joliet? We were supposed to be in Gary, so that's just how it goes, But I won't say it, with that, matter of factness, right? But it's like, okay, I have the patience of a saint when it comes to this. You might discard what it was saying. Fine, I'll just put it up. And then when you get tired of driving out the way, we'll come back to the plan.
It's like you want to stay on track, right?
Yes.
So what in your background or in your life steered you this way? Because you're helping other people get on track. So what did you find in your life that said, hey, this is the thing that I need to do? This is the thing that I really get excited about?
I think it's mostly, when I look back over my life, it really was divine intervention. Because when everything went left with the Great Recession in 2008, I was one of the kids that graduated from school without a job, and I just needed a job. And I found something that I was really good at, and I continued to build upon those skills. And what I'm now realizing is what made me very good about my very first job was the process, the regiment, the routine. And it taught me how to be very calculating in how I do things. Make sure that I'm always thinking for a way to reduce costs, right? So at the time, I worked as a dispatcher for Dish Network, and I had one of the worst areas. Oh my God, they were the baby kids of the office. Like, nobody wanted them. And so, it was fun at first, right? Coming to work and you get to talk smack with these techs that don't want to listen and all this jive, right? Because they would run Jesus out of there. I promise you they would. But, I would just think about it, and I'm like, okay, well, why are they aggravated? Oh, because you had to drive back and forth across Atlanta. So you had to go from the east side to the west side, now to the south side. You had to sit in traffic. You're missing your kid's birthday, all of these different things, right? And so when I started to learn where the demographics was in Atlanta, and I'm like, okay, well, why would I send him over there? Why don't you take these 3 jobs over here that are around the corner from each other? That way you can get more done quicker and then you can go home. They started to appreciate it, right? So not only am I cutting down, the need to have people working overtime, I'm cutting down gas costs, I'm cutting down on tech dissatisfaction, I'm cutting down on angry customers calling and flipping out on me because the tech's supposed to be there between 10 and 4. Now it's 5:30. When I started to understand how to make those things happen, I didn't understand what I was really doing, but it was really a form of project management. This is an out of control situation where I have people walking off the job, people falling through roofs, just all kind of stuff was going on, right? And so it got to the point to where everybody was like, how did you get your territory to go from 33 to number 1? And I did that within 6 to 9 months. And so everybody was coming to me and asking, well, what are you doing? Because on the days that I wasn't there, they weren't having those same results.
Okay.
So that's how I got there. And I started to see how to do things just on a different basis. It's always a strategy involved. And so when people think about project management, most times they always think about the tactical, the administrative side, the management of the schedule, the management of the budget, the management of the resources, the scope and all of that. Yes, it's very tactical, but you also have to have a strategy in mind because you have to think about worst case scenario. And what will you do if this worst case scenario materializes? How are you going to handle that to keep the project on schedule? How are you going to keep the budget not going over? It's so many different things that you have to do, but it's a strategy to it as well. And that's what made me realize that I was good at this, because in every career I figured out the strategy behind it and how can I save money? How can I grow my business, or things like that I would do. And I haven't stopped since I started doing it.
Wow. So what industries do you like to work with in the small business arena?
You know what? That's a good question. And I don't really have a preference. And the reason why I say that is because I've been in IT and telecommunications my whole entire career. I love IT, but project management is something that crosses anything. I've been in healthcare. I've done cybersecurity. I've done infrastructure. I mean, those are somewhat still IT, right? But those are different types of things. And at the end of the day, as a business owner, you have to have infrastructure. You have to have cybersecurity in today's world, or else your customers are going to get hacked and you have an exposure, and that's a fine because now your credit cards are leaking. So these are things that are still applicable to you, even though you're Ray Ray's barbershop, and you're getting up and going. Now those are things that you still have to think about, so whatever I do, my skills are transferable. And I don't necessarily have a preference, but of course, it's easier to me if I do something that's in my wheelhouse in terms of IT or telecommunications, but I'm not limited to that.
So describe a challenging project that you were successful in the completion.
Ooh, I've had so many, because honestly, as you go through this, you start to realize that every project is a problem child. It's always something, you have stakeholders that don't believe in you. They want to sabotage you because they have their own interests to protect. You have, it just depends on who it is, right? You might be running out of money and the project is running behind schedule. I mean, all kinds of things. But I would say the most difficult project was a $15 million project that I had to manage. And it was 4 years behind schedule by the time I came on board. So just really getting the stakeholders, especially my sponsoring stakeholders, to not be upset because I was the 9th project manager to come in that short time frame, and get them to buy into my skills and my ability, and get them to, just neutralize the situation. But I did. And they were so mad when I moved on. They were just like, oh no, not again, but it was just one of those things where you also learn to listen to where other people are coming from. and be receptive so that you can add value to understand why they're angry, or, understand why they're just in one ear out the other, or why they're not coming to your meetings. I mean, there's so many things. Those are superficial, surface level things that can happen, but those things escalate into larger things, and you have to know how to navigate through those things. So every project comes with a problem. It's never as straightforward as it seems, because some details are missing always. Stakeholders are not communicating with other people. They'll start doing something and then they're like, oh yeah, I forgot about this group over here. And this group is adversely affected by what's going on, so you need to understand what that looks like so you can get the requirements and understand what their expectations are to manage them. So it's a lot of different things. No project is without error. Trust me.
Have there been any projects that really made you feel good or fed your soul? Things that you were really happy about being able to help them turn around?
Yes. That I think that's like my strength. It's like knowing that it's jacked up and I'm coming in and I'm fixing it, because one thing I love is when customers, clients, whomever that it may be, once you start to see the proof in the pudding and you're like, okay, you got it. You got it. Let me control this. I got it. You worry about what you got to worry about over here, because this is not what you need to focus on right now, So a lot of times I would say 75% of the projects that I've managed, and that's even on the low end. So I'll say 75 to 80% of the projects that I've managed, I've walked away feeling a sense of gratitude, relief, thanks, excitement, because I'm very resolute about what it is that I'm doing. There's been some projects I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to walk away from this, but those are your stakeholders, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are just difficult to deal with. And it doesn't matter how many times you smile, you nod, you just go with it. Some people just are full of malarkey, just being honest. They just don't respond well. You can document up what you talked about. They'll call you and tell you something else. Now, there was a client that I had that, I was feeling real good and optimistic about working with them, and coming to find out they were having other thoughts other than that, and they were like yell and, just do all kinds of things. So you definitely have to learn how to have the right temperament, and you have to know when to say, okay, all money is not good money. I'm trying my best, but what I'm not here for is verbal abuse. What I'm not here for is physical abuse or anything like that. And that's one of the things, the benefit of being certified is that they tell you, it's about integrity. You do not have to tolerate these different things, and all of that. So now I don't have to deal with that as much, but those were some of the things that I did deal with in the beginning that made it a little bit difficult. And to your question, hindered my satisfaction because I wasn't able to do what I knew I could do or needed to do. So it does happen, quite a bit, but, your success is not always guaranteed when you take on a project. A lot of projects fail because you're missing requirements, or you're not managing expectations appropriately. And those things can cause you to have dissatisfaction because it adds stress onto you, because you're like, dang, how did I know? I missed this because someone's not telling you all that you need to know, to be successful. So it's one of those things where it's like, I wish that number could be much higher than that. But there's so many different things that goes on that can adversely affect what that satisfaction will look like.
So what are some of the examples when working with small businesses that you could share that will actually help them prioritize tasks in a project? I know I sometimes work with small businesses on the financial end, and getting them to prioritize that is kind of difficult sometimes. So what are some of the things you ask them to do, or they can expect to have done or have ready for you when you show up? I'm sure you just don't show up and they throw a bunch of stuff at you and say, here, figure this out.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do, because people don't realize how out of control things are, or how out of control things have been,
Okay.
They don't know until someone who has that discipline to say you're doing way too many things at one time. So to that point, the first thing that I always recommend is you tie every project that you're looking to undertake back into your overall strategic plan. Every company, every company, especially your enterprise companies, they have strategic plans for the next 2 and 3 years. So they're planning that far out in advance what they're going to do when, so that they can budget and have the money readily available to spend. And they have their ceiling and all that stuff like that. So when I meet with a small business and they say, I want to set up a shop on Etsy and I want to have a Shopify store and all this other stuff like that. Well, my first question is, okay, well, how does this tie into your overall strategic plan? Right? Is the goal here for you to get more business? Is the goal here for you to increase revenue? Like, why are we doing what we're doing? And then when we start talking about it, it's like, okay, so once we do this, do you have any other projects that are dependent on the success of this Shopify account going up or this e-commerce? If so, then let's talk about that. Let's unpack how you're going to go through your fulfillment process once you start getting all these orders in. Mm-hmm. How are you going to ship this? What's your expectation? So now we can start having the conversation so that we can prioritize what's first, because it's no point in you starting up a Shopify account if you don't even have your e-commerce platform together. So maybe that's the first one. Shopify is a form of it, but what's your credit card processing? How are you going to ship everything? What is the expectation? Are they going to have 2-day shipping or 3-day shipping? Are you going UPS? Are you going FedEx? Like, how are we doing this? So when you start asking these questions, and it's okay if they don't know. It's really okay if they don't know, because then we can explore. And that's what you do during a discovery phase. And then based on what we talk about, we create a scope. But sometimes people have a scope already in place, and then they haven't thought about these assumptions or these constraints or, these risks that are being imposed. And now that's something else that we have to manage, because they're just going, and they're like, that sounds good. Mm-hmm. And then you went and paid somebody $7,000, and then your stuff is up 4 weeks later after the due date, or everybody is sending things offshore. So you're expecting that you're going to have work done during Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 your time, but really you're working Sunday through Saturday over in India's time, and they're up sending you emails when you're asleep, and now you're having a work stoppage because when they're up, you're asleep. Then when you're asleep, they're up. So those are things that you have to think about, and most people just don't have the capacity to consider all of those facts, and that's where the added value comes from hiring a project management consultant.
Now, what happens when you ask, how does this tie back to your strategic plan? And they say, what strategic plan?
It happens.
I know.
It happens. And believe it or not, I've been in corporate settings where you've asked, where's your roadmap? We shouldn't be talking about anything that's not on the roadmap. And they're like, what roadmap? Deer in headlights. So, I mean, it does happen. But what I always advise people, I said, that's okay. Let's take a step back and let's come up with one. Let's create one. So in your 1-year goal, your 2-year goal, your 3-year goal, your 5 or 10-year goal, what items are you hoping to achieve in this point? And let's time box it. What you think the level F, it's just an estimate, right? It doesn't have to be the end all be all. It's just an estimate. And then what we can do is start to think about this on a high level and talk it through and create that strategic plan. So now you have one. And even if it's just for the next year, you know that you could reuse it for your 3-year plan, your 5-year plan, etc. But it's definitely important to have, especially if you want to scale and grow your business.
Have you, as you work with small businesses, have you found that some actually change their direction or change their plans after your conversation, and what they end up with is much better than what they started with?
Sometimes, because it depends on what they're trying to achieve. Some people may say, oh, that's a big undertaking, I wasn't expecting that, and they may scrap the plan altogether. Some people may actually take your advice and say, you know what, I'm going to put a pause here. Let me think about this further. Let me do some research and I'll get back to you. And that's fine. There has been a time where I had a client that was adamant about doing one thing. And then when we started investigating like the feasibility of it, they was like, oh yeah, scrap that. I don't have time for that right now. But what I do have time for is this over here. And we started talking about it. We started putting some, just some loose dates. We looked at the scope, we looked at the assumptions, we looked at the constraints, we evaluated and came and analyzed with some risk. And when I say risk, people always think the worst case scenario, right? They always think the worst that can happen.
Right.
But risks are also opportunities for you to benefit from. So we looked for some positive things that can come out of that conversation too, or that undertaking as well. And once we did that, they were like, oh, well, this is a much better, project that ties back into the strategic plan. And now what has happened is, since we've rearranged and reprioritized those projects, they're now coming back with a total difference, different set of order, but that original project is a dependent of this project. So now it's easier for us to undertake it as opposed to reaching in an apple basket hoping to pick up an orange,
Right.
So it's just one of those things where you just have to really work with your clients to get them to talk things through and to bounce ideas off of. And also, one thing that I'm really good about doing is that I also try to make sure that I coordinate with other subject matter experts, people that we know that we are very dependent of their expertise. Or I call other people that I know and I say, hey, what do you think about this? I have a good friend of mine who's in cybersecurity. So if I'm having a cybersecurity question, or if I'm meeting with a vendor that I don't think that sounds right, I'll call up and say, hey, tell me a little bit about this. Well, have you heard about this? Is this a reasonable explanation? And you take that information and you go with it. And that's all a part of project management as well.
Are there any businesses who, after working with you, figure that maybe they shouldn't be in business? Because everyone thinks that they can run a business now. Everybody you talk to is going to start a business, and man, they're gonna rule the world.
Yeah. It's never what you think it is, and even for, someone like myself, right, with ample experience, it's a huge undertaking. It's a lot of things that people don't consider. They don't consider how they're going to pay their taxes. They don't consider how they're going to recognize revenue. For some reason, social media has us all thinking that we can all set up a Shopify account or an Etsy store and go from there, and we think that the phone is just going to start ringing off the hook day one. And when that doesn't happen, you have to have a backup plan, because there's still bills for the business that are due. There's still obstacles you have to overcome, marketing, etc. So to answer your question, those who think that they're going to start a business and all of a sudden you're going to have 100,000 followers and everybody's going to buy that, no, that's not how that works. I think I read a statistic that said that it's going to take about 8 or 9 times before a person sees your ads before they respond. So think about how long that is of marketing. So you have to have capital to market to these social media folks. They're always changing the algorithms, so just when you think you got it to where you can get feedback in your posts, they change it again. Now nobody's liking your stuff and you're like, well, what happened?
Right. Unless you have what is the latest thing? A drop shipment business in TikTok. It's the latest thing, right?
Right.
And you just make $10,000 a month doing nothing. Nope. No,
yeah.
right.
Yeah. If you think that, and that's not to say that people cannot be successful doing it, right? But what we don't see and what we fail to recognize is that people who have done this, they have mastered it because it took them a couple of years to figure out how to get their following and to how to get them engaged, So that's the piece that you don't see. You just discovered them last week and you're like, oh, Susie Q over here selling out, but what you didn't see was the other 10 businesses Susie Q done figured out and that did work. Now she just figured out, well, in Atlanta, I'm picking on the people here in Atlanta, but in Atlanta, it was waist cinchers. Then everybody was doing lashes. Now everybody's selling lip gloss. It goes in waves. So you have to figure out a way to be successful and what it is that you're going to do and stick with it. You know, you're never going to get there. I know in the music industry, they always say that it takes 10 years for a person to become an overnight success.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, you got to have 10 years. You know, I believe I saw a statistic once that said that less than 11% of entrepreneurs make $100,000 a year.
Yes.
So, you know, if that's what your goal is, how are you going to become that 11% of people to make $100,000 a year? And then is that your net or your gross? You know, like it's so many different things that we need to uncover before we determine whether or not, you know, you are a good fit for entrepreneurship. And if you don't have the discipline, if you don't have the tenacity, if you don't have the resiliency and the wherewithal, you know, the business acumen, if you don't have any of that, then maybe this is something that's not for you.
So what are some of the measurable results businesses can expect to achieve when working with you?
Absolutely. You're going to stay on budget. We're going to stay on time.
No, you meant to say you're going to have a budget.
Yeah, you're going to have a budget, and we're going to stay within that budget. We're going to stay within that schedule. You know, you can't say, oh, I didn't know, because we're going to talk about this. And you're definitely going to always have measurable outcomes. You know, a lot of times people do things and they don't have any measurable criteria, you know, and that's one of the things I tell every client. You have to have success criteria. You have to. Otherwise, you're just throwing something at the wall to see if it sticks. You're not going into a builder for a home, right? You're not walking into their office and saying, I want to build a home, and you end up with a trailer. That's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? Now, it might happen through several conversations where, you know, you wanted the 7-bedroom house and all that, and that's not in your budget. So that's why you ended up with the trailer. But, you know, they're going to scope things out, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to scope things out for you. We're going to make sure that no one is putting up drywalls if the foundation hasn't been laid. We're not talking about paint and you don't even have your windows up. You know, like there's just certain things that have to be predicated upon certain things in order for you to be able to move. And a lot of times people just go all over the place. So those are some things that we're just not going to do at this point, because the goal is for you to resolve what needs to be resolved, as well as ensuring that we're staying within scope, we're staying within budget, and we're going to do this when we say we're going to do it.
So in this collaborative environment, as you said, small business owners hold things close. This is their baby. And they know what it is they want to accomplish. So do you go over each step slowly, or how do you help them get on that same page?
Sure.
This is their baby. This is a brand new thing. They're birthing it. They know exactly what it's going to look like. They know exactly, so they think they do. They know exactly what they want to happen. So how do you walk them through that? I mean, because there's some small business owners listening now. I know they're probably shaking in their shoes, talking, oh my God, no.
Well, first and foremost, we do a discovery session, which is important, right? Because it's for me to get information not only about you, what you're trying to achieve, what are issues in your business, and how we can make this work. Once we go through that discovery session, at that point, what I would do is make 2 recommendations. Either you can work with me as a business coach where I can guide you on how to get through and we can talk about best practices and recommendations, or you can hire me as a full-fledged one consultant and I will manage everything for you. If you do go through the consulting route, what happens is at that point, I will scope out what it is that we're talking about based on the feedback that I've gotten from you from your discovery session. And I will make sure that I give you some high-level deliverables and timelines, right? So I'm not going to flush out the schedule because I don't know what the schedule looks like just yet, because we haven't talked to your suppliers, we haven't talked to your vendors, you know, we haven't identified all of your stakeholders, so we haven't gotten the estimates. So it's a lot of things that you haven't identified at this point. Okay. But what I'll say is, you know, Dr. Coleman, based on our conversation, this is what I think it looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some time to complete the discovery session with these other resources, do effective planning, scope it out. Once I get that much information and I understand what our assumptions are, what our constraints are, identify some high level risks, I can put together a high level project that says, within the next 4 weeks, we should be entering the design phase of what it is that you're trying to achieve. Once we complete that we would get all the renderings, do a further analysis to identify any gaps, understand if we have all the requirements, functional, business, and technical requirements. And believe it or not, even though that sounds very techy, those still apply. So if you were going to build a house, we have to know what the technical requirements are. Oh, you got to have electricity. You don't say,
water too may help, right?
Right. You have to have plumbing, right? So the functional use case will be, oh, we need to use the restroom. We need to wash dishes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The business requirements are, well, you have to have a house that you can live in, right? So you see how those things transfer. And then once we have those conversations with the scope and what was presented, we'll do an analysis to see, okay, what is missing? How do we close that gap? Oh, you have to have a dishwasher and it's not a space for a dishwasher. Is the dishwasher a deal breaker? I mean, this ain't 1952 anymore. So yes, we need a dishwasher. So we need to go back to the board and redesign what the kitchen looks like. You understand what I'm saying? But when you're going through this, you have to have time to do that. And that's something that I account for. I account for delays in the schedule. I account for folks being out of the office. Nobody's sitting around working 24 hours a day, So these are things that I account for in the schedule. Mm-hmm. And then I would say, okay, well, now that we have all of the analysts out of the way, now I anticipate that it's going to take them about 3 months to build your house. So based on that, I expect for you to be able to close with the bank by this time. I expect for you to be able to move in by this time and deal with any post-warranty stuff that you got going on. So I know I'm using the analogy of a house because most people can understand that. But when it comes to your business, you could say, I got 2 weeks to get this up and running. And I could say that may happen or that may not happen, depending on what's going on, but let's be realistic. And that's the thing that a lot of people are not. We're not realistic about time and feasibility and how much it really costs to get things done. Like, sure, you want me to get a website up in 2 weeks? Oh, that's going to cost you a pretty penny. If you don't have $20,000 sitting around, I think you might want to add some time and push out that opening date, So these are things that we can do, to help you be successful. And it comes with a lot of years of experience, but it also comes at a point where it's like, okay, she really knows what she's talking about here. And I become a trusted advisor and a strategic partner in helping you achieve your goals. So those are just some high level things that you can expect. But generally, you're going to expect to have great communication. So if you want to meet with me every day, I'll put 15 minutes on the calendar and say, here's where we are. Or if you say, I don't have time for that, just give me an update on Friday. I can give you an update on Friday. I can send it to you. We can meet. We can walk through sites. I do all of that. But those are the added values that you get from having somebody here. So if you say, you know what, I'm really nervous about this, I can say, you know what, you don't be upset about this. Let me worry about it. And you transfer all those risks over to me. And then I could be over here pulling out my hair, Right. But that's the benefit of having someone like me on your team.
Now, are there any basic software programs or packages that small businesses should have anyway before you show up?
Well, in all honesty, at a bare minimum, you do need to have at least Microsoft Suite, access to email, Excel, some people use Google Suite, whatever, but you need some type of spreadsheet program, right? Because at a bare minimum, if you can't afford to have Microsoft Project, or you can't afford to have Smartsheets or ClickUp or any of these other tools, at a minimum, we can do everything we need to do in an Excel file, and we can do everything that we need to do within Teams, right? So those are basic tools that you need to really have. We can draw pictures in Excel. I'm sorry, not Excel, PowerPoint. Even though I don't want to use PowerPoint because I'm a little advanced for that, but the point is that I can still use it to convey and to work with you. So at a minimum, I would say definitely your Microsoft Suite.
Because a lot of small businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs do get started not understanding there are some bare minimum things that they need and that they shouldn't be so resistant to some of the project board software. Because that's really important, the way it's moving, the world is moving today.
And they make it so easy for you to have access to it. Like when you really think about it, ClickUp is very equitable, right? You can get a free account and you can go from there. And so it's no excuse not to be forward thinking, but I understand it's intimidating, right? And when you don't have time to investigate, because I'm not going to lie to you, as much as I know as business owners, it's so many tools out there and so many recommendations, and half the stuff is repetitive. So you use this for that, and you use this, and then you start using this, and then you get tired of this because this doesn't integrate with this. So now you're moving on to this. And then next thing you know, you have 20 different softwares that you're paying for that all do the same thing. So what I would advise is find what makes you the most comfortable, grow with it, find whatever integrates with the solutions that you already have in place. Save yourself some time and some money by integrating with what is available. So, for example, if you know that your Microsoft doesn't integrate well, and I'm just throwing something out there, don't shoot me, but if you know Microsoft doesn't integrate well with ClickUp, then maybe that's something you probably shouldn't buy a license to. Maybe you should just use something that integrates and plays fair with Microsoft, because that's what you use within your suite.
You're right. There are a lot of shiny nickels out there. I can't tell you how many calendar programs I have.
And they don't integrate with anything else.
They don't integrate with anything else. They're just cute. They're new, latest thing. And then you literally end up saying, you know what, let me just stick with this one. And then you forget to cancel the other one. So do be careful, but you do have to have some of the basics. And for those of you who have businesses and you don't have at least Excel or Google Suite, there are free tutorials on YouTube. I suggest you watch them, because Alexis is right. You can do a whole lot of stuff in an Excel spreadsheet program if that's where you are.
Right.
And don't upgrade just because there's the new shiny nickel out there. Talk to your consultant to let you know.
Right. Because that affects your productivity,
Yes.
and at the end of the day, if you're not being productive, that's costing you money. If your team that is supporting your business can't figure out how to use something, that's costing productivity, which is increasing costs, which is not making you any money, because now you're losing money. So these are things, and I'm glad we're having this conversation about the software piece of it too, because that is a project. Right? You want whatever it is to come on to streamline your operations. You don't want us to take anything that is going to complicate, because if I'm on the front line and I can't figure out how to get your Cash App to work, or not, what is it called? Square Cash. If I can get your Square to figure out how to work on the iPad, now you got a line of customers. Somebody don't walk out the door because you can't even get the machine to swipe the credit card. Or you have this new processor in place and now your internet bandwidth is not strong enough to support it. So now there's delays like in between each transaction. And guess what that does? That adversely affects your customer experience, or you don't want somebody doing an upgrade in the middle of a Wednesday at 12 o'clock in the middle of your workday. These are planned activities that need to take place overnight, on the weekend, during your downtime. So those are like little small things that a project management consultant can coordinate for you to ensure that you're not going to put yourself in a compromising situation that could be very damaging to your brand and your business in the long run.
Exactly. And updates are important, and small business owners do run your updates, please. So I see that you're also Scrum Master certified. So for those who don't know what that is, what is that?
So in project, shiny nickel.
There goes shiny nickel.
That shiny nickel.
I got a few of those too. So
yeah. So in project management, we're in it, and I'm glad you just said this a moment ago. Everything is so progressive in the field of project management that Scrum is one of the more likable approaches in business, because it adds value fast. So you don't work on anything unless it's going to be the minimum of what you can deliver. So for example, getting your email system up and running, we can do that within a short time box of 2 to 6 weeks, 2 weeks on a positive note, 4 weeks, excuse me. I said 6 weeks. I misspoke, but 4 weeks, worst case scenario, right? But you do things in a sprint. It's very unorganized, in my opinion, less documentation. But the goal is to put something out there, and we don't care if it's broken. We'll just come back and we'll fix it in the next sprint, which will be the next 2 weeks, right? And so it's very agile. It's flexibility. Teams don't have people reporting to each other, etc. And a lot of people are gravitating towards it because they get value to their customers faster, with the understanding that we're going to go back and we're going to modify this once we get it out there. So yeah, it's not exactly how we wanted it to be, but it's functioning, and we'll come back and we'll do an update to that release in the next couple of weeks. And it's so interesting because everybody and their mama is gravitating towards these agile principles, but if you don't manage it well, it can be one of those things where it's like, it's a bunch of chaos,
Mm-hmm.
And things are not being delivered, and it's not adding value and driving revenue into your business. So if you're not careful, you can waste more money trying to fix things instead of just taking a pause and going back and saying, okay, let's take all the time that it needs to design and to build so we get an effective product. So while I have my credentials in that area, it is the new buzz thing that's going on in a lot of businesses. And what I'm finding is, in talking to other people who are Scrum certified, is that it's not always the best thing. So what you need to understand through talking to your consultant, what is the best method and approach for how you should implement your projects. And just because someone else is implementing agile and they're doing all of this, doesn't mean that that's something that's going to be an added value for you.
Yes, it does. It really needs, that's something that really needs a conversation along with your business consultant, because a lot of people are jumping over, and there are just some clear instances where it's just not a good fit. So with that being said, there are a lot of great things that people can use. Not all of them are good fits for everyone. So the businesses that are listening, be sure that if there's something that's getting your attention, you do talk to a consultant about it, because you don't want to buy something that you're not going to be able to use later. And talking to the person who will spend money on shiny nickels, it's like, don't do it. You can't give them away, okay, when you don't need them and you're just sitting there. So let's go back. The book. I'm really interested in the book, the cover. So, because you go from a really technical project sort of mind to a book, to a project that requires you to actually live in your imagination and things like that. And I know that even what you do as a consultant requires an incredible amount of imagination, and people probably don't put the two together, because it's that imagination that allows you to think about all those other things. So is there going to be a sequel, and what caused you to start there?
So you sound like my teacher who just passed away this year. But she was actually my creative writing teacher when I was in elementary school. And she's like, well, you can't leave your story there. You have to tell your story. And I'm just like, I have nothing to say. But for everyone who likes to think that these books are the next shiny nickel, writing books are very complicated and intricate. You have to really have a go-to-market plan as you write and move forward. And you have to have a strategy about how you're going to write the book and how you're going to market the book, especially for those of us who like to self-publish and, all that stuff. So it's a lot that comes with it. While I enjoy writing was like my first passion. Honestly, it was. It's one of those things where it's like, do I really have to do this again? I'm like, what would be the end goal? Now, if Oprah called and she says, girl,
let's hang out and you write a book.
Right.
You'll be on my show, right?
Right. Oh my God. Alexis, I read the cover. When are you going to release another one? I'd be like, tomorrow, But, it's just one of those things where I enjoyed it. It served its purpose for that season in my life. But right now, I don't have much to say. Right now, I'm at a point where, it's just one of those things where I don't have anything else to say. So I am going to look forward to eventually, at some point or another, I will, write another book. But right now, I don't have anything in me to say. It's a lot of effort. I think that things are going in a direction that is more visual. You know, I know a lot of people who are, writing books and doing audio and things like that, but I just don't have it in me right now. I just don't.
Well, I thought that was just cool. I said, my God, she started writing a book and then she leaped off into something else. That is really incredible. So tell us a little bit about your activity or your participation with the STEAM program. That's where you
Absolutely.
encourage young ladies to do science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics.
Absolutely.
All of those.
So, what made me get involved with the STEM program within the schools is understanding that there's less than 2.5% of women of color that are actually in the STEM field. And so when you walk into the corporate world and you're seeing that there are not many people who look like you understand the value of what it means to give back and how representation matters and the importance of motivating our young girls to, think outside the box and to understand that there's a space for them. I do realize that unfortunately, people tend to have setbacks, right? They're discouraged along the way. And if you think about it, there's so many girls that are going to school, but they're not finishing their program in the STEM field, like they're dropping out, and that's statistically proven. So my goal is to be there to say, listen, you push through. You got this. Maybe you're not going to be an electrical engineer, but that doesn't mean you can't be a civil engineer or, rethink what it looks like. Or just because you don't see anybody in your class that looks like you doesn't mean that you don't belong there. You still apply yourself. You still have the brains and the gifts and the wits and all of that to be able to move forward. So I definitely enjoy working with the kids. It's very refreshing, to work with them because I moved from the geeky mom to the cool mom, and so they start to be like, oh, Miss Alexis, look what I did, so it's very exciting. I enjoy it. I don't belabor it at all. The more I'm involved with the inner city schools, the more I understand the need for it. And I'm just thankful that I'm able to give back and to be able to land with these kids.
Well, I do appreciate the work that you do with them too. I work with kids a lot, especially thing. I love math, but I think that you can do all of that. So for those of you who are listening, please participate and finish the program, and you'll be surprised what you learn. You don't have to be, people think you have to be super, super smart and you don't have to be super, super smart. You'll be surprised at how smart you are when you get a program that challenges you and requires you to think about things a different way. And you'll be surprised at how much fun that is, because as we see, Alexis has been just on fire with all of this project management stuff and helping us solve our problems and our businesses. And I really appreciate your energy. It's just coming through the screen. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. All it requires is for you to be a life learner. Things are so progressive. Just be open-minded, be receptible, and be adaptive to what's going on out there. And you can make a difference. It doesn't have to always be Billy or Susie. It can be Keisha.
Right. And Stephanie and Alexis and Sean. Right.
And Monique and anybody else,
Right.
So let's do it, because there's other people in other cultures who are adamant about taking up space, and they're unapologetic about it. And if we're not showing up and representing ourselves, then what'll happen is we'll get drowned out, and then we won't be in existence in those places. And then we wonder why they're creating products and services that don't suit us and don't serve us. It's because we're not in those rooms having those conversations. So it's very important that you stick through it. Get you a mentor, a trusted advisor. Look on YouTube, find those scenarios where people are out there talking about their jobs, and go with it.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with having a mentor or a tutor or whatever you may need. So because having that different set of eyes and ideas and just someone to bounce things off of, people just don't know how, especially you feel it in teams if you work in teams, but when you're sort of out there by yourself, you just don't know. So please do it. Please. So I want to thank you for joining me tonight for this episode on helping business owners grow, especially small businesses. It's been my pleasure to have you. We are coming to the end of the show, so it's where we will say thank you again. And I want to encourage everyone listening to please take her advice, because this is very important advice, and it will help you grow your business faster than you realize, especially when you get on track with a consultant that can help you stay focused on the important pieces of the business, because small business owners generally are a team of one or two, and they can easily get distracted. So thank you very much for that. As I always say, may this day offer you just what you need in each unfolding moment. Be inspired until further notice, and I want you to celebrate everything. Do not go gently into that good night to find the heel worth dying for, and take it and be the person that you have been waiting for. Make today so wonderful that yesterday gets jealous, and above all else, do it your way. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, known as the Empowerment Doctor. And as I always say, life is too short to drink cheap champagne. Thank you, Alexis, and you have a great evening.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time so much.
You're welcome. We'll talk again, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
But life's too short to drink cheap champagne, so I decided to buy me a better brand to taste with